Your hormones age faster than you do. How to stop it. Eleanor was 67 when she told me something I'll never forget. I feel like my body is aging in places I didn't agree to. She had smiled when she said it, wryly, with that sharp wit only age sharpens. But behind the humor was a deeper discomfort, a betrayal almost, not by time itself, but by something quieter and more hidden. Her hormones. They don't wrinkle like skin or stiffen like joints. They don't show up in family photos, waving with silver hair. But they vanish, slowly, almost politely, until one day you look around and realize the desire is dimmer, the sleep is thinner, the energy has left without saying goodbye. And yet Eleanor was not sick. Her heart was strong, her blood work mostly normal. What she felt wasn't illness, it was erosion, of clarity, of connection, of self. And she's not alone. Most people think aging begins with the skin or the spine or maybe the heart. But for many, especially women, it begins with hormones. Long before we see it in the mirror, we feel it in the silence of our chemistry. But here's the truth. No one told Eleanor. Hormones don't just fade with age, they fall behind. They age faster than the rest of us, and unless we catch them, unless we support them with kindness and knowledge, they will quietly take our joy with them. But it doesn't have to end there, because like all stories that begin with a slow unraveling, there is a way back, not to youth, but to equilibrium. Let me show you how. Imagine walking into a room that once smelled of wildflowers and now smells of dust. Nothing is wrong, per se, just less. That's what a hormone imbalance feels like to the body. And if you're over 60, chances are that room hasn't been aired out in a while. For women, estrogen drops sharply after menopause. But here's the twist. It's not just about hot flashes or night sweats. It's about the brain fog, the brittle sleep, the sudden inability to feel present in your own skin. For men, testosterone doesn't fall off a cliff, but it seeps out year by year. What's left is often mistaken for depression or fatigue. But really, it's a kind of hormonal hunger, a longing for vitality that used to come uninvited. Now here's the unexpected truth. Your hormones are not gone. They're negotiable. Like an old friend who stopped calling because they thought you stopped caring. With the right approach, natural rhythms, micronutrient support, lifestyle compassion, they begin to respond, but it begins with understanding the enemy. And that enemy isn't just aging, it's inflammation. Picture this, a candle flickering on a calm night. That's your hormone system in balance. Now imagine a gust of wind, barely visible, but constant. That's chronic inflammation. It blows through your endocrine system, disrupting the signals between your brain and your glands. Suddenly, estrogen isn't being made in the right places. Testosterone isn't converting properly. Cortisol, the stress hormone, takes over the stage, and now you're waking at 3 a.m. You're irritable without cause. You're gaining weight even when eating less. This was Roger's story. At 71, he'd resigned himself to what he called the flatline years. No depression, but no joy. No libido, but no pain. Just gray. We ran a full panel on Roger. His testosterone was technically normal, but barely. His cortisol was high. His vitamin D was low, and his sleep was fractured. We didn't give him a miracle drug. We gave him light. Morning sun, gentle strength training, magnesium before bed, a tiny dose of DHEA, guided by his labs. 6 weeks later, he told me, "It's not that I feel younger, I feel plugged back in." And here's what's key. It didn't take much, just consistency, attention, and most of all, respect for the body's timing. Hormones are like old jazz musicians. They don't play on command. But if you give them the right setting, the right instruments, they come back to life. But perhaps the most surprising hormone story I know came from Marjorie, 76. She had no intention of talking about hormones when she came in. "I'm just tired," she said. "It's probably grief, or the weather, or politics." But as we talked, her symptoms unfolded like petals: thinning hair, dry eyes, sudden skin irritation, a kind of lostness she couldn't name. All of it pointed to estrogen's quieter cousin, progesterone. Most people forget about her. She doesn't get the headlines, but she's the hormone of calm, of sleep, of emotional steadiness. And after menopause, she often leaves without warning. With a small bioidentical cream, nothing fancy, Marjorie's sleep returned. Her shoulders dropped. Her laugh came back, softer, slower, but real. "You know," she said, "I didn't realize how much I'd left behind. I thought I was coping. I wasn't. I was disappearing." And that, to me, is the heart of this story. Hormones don't just regulate our organs, they regulate our sense of self. And when they fade, they don't just take energy. They take parts of us we didn't know we'd miss. But we can get them back, not by turning the clock, but by listening to our rhythms, our foods, our rest, by choosing presence over performance, gentleness over grit. Next, I'll take you into the hidden world of sleep hormones and why your 3 a.m. wake-ups may have less to do with your bladder than with a forgotten chemical called melatonin. But for now, let me ask you something. When did you last feel attuned to your own body? Not just pain-free, not just functional, but alive? Because that feeling, that sense of inner brightness, is not youth. It's balance, and it's waiting. Let's find our way back to it. Together. The hormones of night, what wakes you up at 3 a.m., isn't what you think. If the body is a house, sleep is the lock on the front door. Without it, everything is vulnerable: memory, emotion, immunity, even love. And yet, sometime after 60, sleep becomes elusive. Not gone, just shy. You fall asleep fine, perhaps with the help of a crossword or a warm bath. But then, like a ghost through the hallway, you're awake at 3:14 a.m. Again. Your bladder whispers, your thoughts shout, and sleep, that old friend, refuses to come back. But what if I told you that your bladder isn't to blame? What if the real culprit is a hormone you used to make in abundance, but now barely at all? Its name is melatonin, and it's not just for sleep. Melatonin is your body's whisper to the brain that night has fallen. It is the conductor of your circadian orchestra. When it's present, the heart rate slows, the blood pressure drops, and the brain begins to rinse itself clean. Yes, clean. The brain has a waste management system that only activates during deep sleep. When melatonin fades, so does that cleansing, so does the stillness, so does the repair. And so you wake, not just tired, but inflamed. Foggy. Unrested in a way coffee can't fix. This is what happened to Robert. He was 68 and had recently retired from a high-pressure job in finance. "I thought sleep would be the one thing I'd finally get," he told me, "but I feel more worn out now than when I worked 60-hour weeks." His labs showed high evening cortisol, low melatonin, low magnesium. His body was stuck in daytime, even at 2 a.m. We didn't start with pills. We started with rhythm. Light in the morning, darkness at night. No screens past 9, a warm magnesium foot soak before bed. And yes, 0.3 mLs of melatonin, not the over-the-counter 5 million doses that shocked the system, but a gentle reminder to his brain that it was safe to let go. It took 3 weeks, and then, one morning, he came in smiling. "I slept through the night," he said. "But more than that, I dreamed. I remembered dreaming. I haven't had a dream in years." And that's when I knew. His brain had started to repair. But sleep is more than a function. It's a ritual of surrender. And for many older adults, surrender feels unsafe. When you've lost people, when your body has surprised you with weakness or betrayal, Letting go into sleep can feel like a kind of vulnerability too tender to risk. That's what I heard from Teresa. Widowed. Hadn't slept well since the funeral 5 years earlier. I fall asleep, she said. But then I wake up and I feel like the world is watching, like I shouldn't be resting, like I haven't earned it. We talked about her hormone levels, yes. But more importantly, we talked about permission. Her progesterone was nearly gone, an unsung hero in women's sleep. Progesterone doesn't just balance estrogen, it soothes the nervous system, acts on the same receptors as a calming drug, but gently, without numbing. I prescribed a small cream. She was skeptical, but she used it, and after a month, she told me something I will never forget. I woke up and the birds were singing. I hadn't heard them in years. She had been sleeping right through them, not deeply, but distantly, as if her soul had stayed awake, even while her body rested. Now it was back. Both of them. So here's what I want you to remember. That 3 a.m. wake-up? It's not just age. It's your body trying to speak in a language you forgot you knew. It's saying, I need help navigating the dark. Melatonin, progesterone, cortisol, these are not abstract terms. They are the script writers of your nights. And when they fall out of harmony, the story becomes jagged, incomplete. But it can be rewritten, sometimes with light, sometimes with nutrients, sometimes with the gentle act of believing you deserve real rest. In our next chapter, we'll explore the hormone you think you know, testosterone, and why the version you had at 35 is not the one you need at 65, especially if you're a woman. But before we go there, ask yourself this. What if your exhaustion isn't your fault? What if your sleeplessness isn't a symptom, but a signal? Because signals can be read, and when we listen, we heal. We don't fix what's broken. We welcome back what was waiting. Shall we keep going? Testosterone isn't a man's hormone, and it was never about muscle. When we hear testosterone, we picture something loud, a deep voice, a strong jaw, muscles that belong on a poster, not in a mirror. But that image is a trick, a marketing stunt. Testosterone, in truth, is not about volume. It's about clarity, about direction and confidence, and the feeling of being oriented in your own life. And it isn't just for men. In fact, one of the most heartbreaking things I see, again and again, is women in their 60s and 70s feeling flat. Not sad, not broken, just unlit, like someone turned the dimmer down on their presence. Often, the cause is simple. Their testosterone is almost gone. Yes, women have testosterone too, not as much as men, but enough that when it disappears, something essential vanishes with it. Assertiveness, desire, bone strength. The ability to get up and say, this is my life and I want it back. That was Judith's story. She was 72, widowed, a retired piano teacher. Her children loved her, her community adored her, but she felt invisible. I don't feel things anymore, she said. Music doesn't move me. I don't laugh the way I used to, and I have no idea what I want. I just do what's expected. We checked her labs. Estrogen, low but expected. Progesterone, almost gone. Testosterone, undetectable. Now, testosterone therapy in women is delicate. It's not about transformation. It's about remembering. We started with a microdose cream tailored for her, nothing that would change her voice or face, just enough to wake up her sense of wanting again. 6 weeks later, she came in wearing red lipstick. I don't even know why, she laughed. I just felt like it. But the truth is, she knew, her body knew. It was saying, I'm still here. And then there's the other side of the story, men like Samuel. At 66, he was a quiet, thoughtful man, married 40 years, recently retired. He'd lost weight, watched his diet, did everything right. But still, he felt off. Not weak, not ill, just disconnected. I don't initiate anything anymore, he said quietly. not conversations, not intimacy, not plans. I wait, and when nothing happens, I say, "Oh well." But inside, I feel hollow. We looked at his numbers. His testosterone was technically in range, but barely. And his free testosterone, the part his body could actually use, was almost non-existent. His SHBG, a protein that binds testosterone, was too high. His DHEA was low. His cortisol, elevated. We didn't jump to injections. We started with the foundation: zinc and vitamin D, cutting sugar and processed carbs, strength training, slow, consistent, 3 days a week, sleep support, and conversation. About identity, about what it means to feel needed. Because here's what I've learned: testosterone follows purpose. If you have no reason to rise, your hormones will not rise for you. 4 months later, Samuel's numbers were up, but more importantly, he was up. Earlier in the morning, calling old friends, surprising his wife with breakfast. He wasn't performing youth, he was living engagement. Now let me tell you something you don't often hear. You can have high testosterone and still feel powerless, and you can have low testosterone and still feel alive, if you are aligned. So when I say restore hormones, I don't mean chase a number. I mean reclaim a rhythm. The rhythm of aliveness, of initiative, of spark. And that rhythm is not summoned by pills alone. It is summoned by movement, nourishment, connection. And yes, sometimes gentle supplementation, but never out of shame, only out of curiosity and care. Because testosterone, like all hormones, responds to how you live, not just how you dose. And when you stop living reactively and begin living with intention, your body notices. It listens. It responds, sometimes quietly, sometimes all at once. Next, we'll open the door to the hormone we fear the most, cortisol, the stress sentinel, the silent saboteur. We'll ask, what if it's not anxiety? What if it's hormonal hijack? What if your peace has been chemically stolen and you can get it back? But before we move forward, let me ask, when was the last time you wanted something deeply? Not needed, not expected, wanted, because that wanting, that little internal flame, isn't selfish. It's sacred, and it may be your first sign that your hormones are trying to come home. Shall we walk through the next door together? The hormone that hijacks peace. How cortisol steals your stillness. "Doc," Harold said, "I don't feel stressed, but I also haven't exhaled in 10 years. He said it like a joke, but his eyes stayed still. Behind them, I could see the truth. This man had lived in fight or flight for so long, he'd forgotten what peace felt like. And he's not alone. If testosterone gives us initiative and melatonin gives us rest, then cortisol is the fire alarm. And for many adults over 60, that alarm never turns off. It doesn't scream. It whispers. Through shallow sleep, tight shoulders, a heart that beats faster when it shouldn't, a constant sense that something, somewhere, is wrong. And here's the cruel irony. It happens most often to those who've already survived the hardest parts. Widowhood, retirement. The end of caregiving years. The final mortgage payment. On paper, things should feel lighter, but inside, the body doesn't believe it, because cortisol is not about the truth. It's about perceived danger, and in a body with aging hormones, even routine experiences, blood sugar dips, loneliness, inflammation, can register as threat. That's what was happening to Harold. He was 74, strong, active, admired in his community, but he couldn't sit still, couldn't nap, couldn't enjoy a quiet room. "I always feel like I'm behind," he said. Behind on what? I couldn't tell you, but it's like my nervous system didn't retire with the rest of me. We ran his labs. Morning cortisol, high, evening cortisol, even higher. DHEA, suppressed, blood pressure, spiking at night. No wonder he couldn't relax. His body was still chasing lions that no longer existed. But cortisol isn't the villain. It's the soldier that stayed too long after the war. What Harold needed wasn't sedation. He needed permission to stand down. We started small. No supplements, just pattern interruption. 10 minutes of nature each morning without a phone. No caffeine after 10 a.m. A journaling ritual at 4 p.m. What went well today? Gentle breathing before bed. And laughter. Mandatory. 2 weeks later, he said, "I still don't nap, but I'm not panicking when I rest, and my wife says I'm less sharp, but in a good way." Cortisol didn't disappear, but it recalibrated. Now here's where things get more subtle and more dangerous. High cortisol doesn't always look like anxiety. Sometimes it looks like forgetfulness, or weight around the middle, or random, unexplained inflammation, or craving sugar at 9 p.m., or snapping at someone you love and not knowing why. And for women, post-menopause, cortisol often becomes the dominant hormone. Estrogen and progesterone have faded. Testosterone is low, and cortisol rushes in to take the stage. The result? Overwhelm, sleep problems, tension, not because of who you are, but because of who's running the system. Ruth's story shows this in full color. She was 69, a retired nurse, proud, dignified, and deeply exhausted. Her children said she was becoming overly sensitive. Her sister said she was always on edge. But when I asked how she felt, she said simply, "I feel brittle." That word stayed with me. We checked everything: thyroid, iron, B12. It all looked acceptable, but her cortisol curve was flat and high. Her body had forgotten how to rise and fall. It was stuck in vigilance, always prepared, never safe. We used rhodiola, a gentle adaptogen, phosphatidylserine, a natural cortisol buffer, magnesium at night, and a radical new habit, doing nothing for 20 minutes a day. Not yoga, not reading, not praying, just nothing. At first, she hated it. By week 4, she said, "I don't feel brittle, I feel porous, like things can pass through me again." That's when I knew she was healing, because cortisol doesn't just affect stress. It hijacks metabolism, blunts memory, disrupts intimacy, dulls joy. And the fix isn't force, it's rhythm. The body needs cycles: light and dark, effort and rest, input and stillness. And when we restore those, even just a little, cortisol steps back. Not as a punishment, but as a thank you, because it never wanted to be in charge. Next, we will open the door to the most misunderstood hormone of all: insulin, not just the diabetes hormone, but the silent puppet master of aging, of fog, of fatigue, of hormonal harmony itself. And we'll ask, what if your energy crashes and memory slips aren't aging? What if they're blood sugar signals, asking for balance? But before we go there, let me ask, do you still feel capable of calm? Not numbed, not distracted, just calm? Because that calmness isn't a luxury. It's a biological right, and you can reclaim it, not through force, but through deep, earned softness. When sugar steals the spark, the hidden hormone that ages you. In silence. By the time Margaret came to see me, she had read 3 books, taken 5 supplements, and watched 27 YouTube videos on energy over 60. And she was still exhausted. "I don't get it," she said. "I eat healthy. I walk. I sleep okay-ish. But every day around 11 a.m. and again at 3 p.m., it's like someone unplugs me. I could cry for no reason, or eat toast and peanut butter in the dark." She chuckled, but not really. Margaret wasn't broken. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't even sick. She was swinging between blood sugar highs and hormonal crashes. And the conductor of that painful rhythm was a hormone called insulin. Now we think of insulin only when diabetes enters the room. We think needles, strict diets, scary warnings. But insulin is with us long before the diagnosis. It's the doorman between your bloodstream and your cells. It tells your muscles when to accept sugar. It tells your brain when to store energy or burn it. And when it starts whispering instead of shouting, as it often does with age, everything gets foggy. Energy, focus, sleep, mood. All the things that make us feel like ourselves. Here's the part nobody tells you. You don't need to have diabetes for insulin to disrupt your life. You just need what nearly 70% of adults over 60 already have and don't know. Insulin resistance. What does it look like? That sudden drop in energy after eating. That belly fat that won't budge, even with salads. That sense of brain fog in the afternoon, that craving for sweets after dinner, even if you're full, that feeling of being tired but wired, and worst of all, those small mood dips that feel like aging but are really chemistry. Margaret had all of them. We ran her labs. Her fasting glucose was borderline. Her A1C was 5.9, not quite diabetes, but not stable. Her fasting insulin, though, through the roof. Her body was making insulin like mad, but her cells had stopped listening, and so her energy crashed. Her hormones struggled. Her weight clung to her like grief. We didn't prescribe a miracle. We began a slow unwinding. No sugar before 10 a.m. A walk after every meal, just 10 minutes. High-protein breakfast every single day. A tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in water before dinner. Magnesium and cinnamon in the evening. And the hardest one of all, no snacking after 7 p.m. She didn't love it, but she felt curious, and within 3 weeks, the 3 p.m. crash disappeared. Within 6, the late-night cravings stopped, and then came the moment I always wait for. I forgot to nap today, she said, not because I was fighting it. I just didn't need it. But this isn't just about fatigue. Insulin resistance affects every other hormone. It lowers testosterone. It blocks progesterone receptors. It amplifies cortisol. It disrupts melatonin. It inflames estrogen pathways. In other words, you cannot fix your hormones if your blood sugar is out of rhythm. And the tragedy? Most adults think their memory loss, their libido dips, their low energy are just part of getting older. But in many cases, it's not aging, it's fuel mismanagement. Their body isn't starving, it's misreading the menu. And the fix? It's not starvation, it's stability. Steady meals, gentle movement, honest rhythms, no perfection, just consistency. I remember one patient, Daniel, who said, "I thought I had early dementia. Turns out I just needed to stop skipping breakfast." That's the power of insulin. Quiet, profound, but overlooked. It is not sexy. It won't go viral, but it may be the hormone that determines whether your 70s feel like an epilogue or a new act. Next, we'll complete the circle with a return to the body's deepest rhythm, connection. We'll look at oxytocin, the so-called love hormone, and ask what it means to touch, to hold, to belong, even after loss. But before we get there, pause and ask, when you feel tired, do you blame yourself, or do you wonder what your cells might be asking for? Because tiredness isn't always a weakness. Sometimes it's a whisper, saying, "Help me even out the fire." Let's answer that whisper together. The hormone of holding, how oxytocin repairs, what aging forgot. Miriam had been widowed for 12 years. She still wore her ring, still kept his jacket on the chair by the door. Not because she hadn't moved on, but because some part of her still felt held by him. But when she came into my office, she wasn't there to talk about grief. She wanted to know why her body had gone quiet. "I don't feel desire anymore," she said. "And I'm not talking about sex. I mean touch comfort. Even the idea of leaning against someone, it just feels foreign." She had tears in her voice, but not her eyes. It wasn't sadness, it was distance, and I knew exactly what was missing. Oxytocin. Most people hear the word and think of childbirth, or nursing, or the bond between mother and child. But oxytocin is more than that. It is the glue of belonging, the chemical signature of being safely, deeply with another person. It is released with touch, with eye contact, with trust, with presence. And when we age, especially alone, it begins to wither. Now here's the part that might surprise you. Oxytocin isn't just emotional. It is biological protection. It lowers cortisol. It supports immune function. It calms inflammation. It stabilizes heart rhythms. It improves sleep quality. It even supports metabolism. In other words, oxytocin is the emotional hormone with medical consequences. And when it's missing, everything else suffers. Not dramatically, just slowly, like a plant that never quite dies, but never quite blooms again. Miriam had not touched another person in any meaningful way outside of handshakes and hugs with her grandchildren for over a decade. And her labs told the story. Her cortisol was high, her sleep fractured, her inflammatory markers elevated, her blood pressure teetering, even with meds. But her heart? It was quiet. Too quiet. We didn't give her medication. We gave her presence. She joined a local Tai Chi group where touch was gentle but shared. She began volunteering at a pet therapy clinic, offering warmth to animals and receiving it back. She scheduled weekly calls, not texts, with her sister. She allowed her granddaughter to brush her hair again, the way she used to. 6 weeks later, she came in with the smallest change. Her hands were warmer. That's oxytocin. It literally improves circulation to the extremities. But more than that, it returns the body to a state of receiving. Here's the deeper truth. You cannot force oxytocin. You must invite it. And it will not come through screens, through scrolling, through performance. It comes through mutuality. Even brief, 15 minutes of true connection, face to face, skin to skin, or heart to heart, can restore it. And when it returns, so does empathy, laughter, gentle arousal, memory, resilience, hope. I've seen it over and over. Older couples who sleep back to back because they forgot how to turn toward each other. Widows who sit with pets and feel their heartbeat change. Men who cry in my office, not from pain, but from realizing it's the first time someone really listened in years. That's oxytocin. Not a drug, not a therapy, a presence, a belonging. And if you're thinking, but I'm alone, what about me? Here's the secret. Oxytocin doesn't require romance. It requires recognition. You can get it from physical touch, massage, even self-massage. Eye contact with a trusted friend. Music that brings memory. Laughter in a shared room. Prayer, ritual, or song that connects you to something larger. Holding a pet. Being held in someone's attention. You're not too late. You're not too distant. You're not too old for this chemical. You were made for it. Next, we will close this series with a return to where we began, not with a symptom or a number, but with a question. What if your hormones aren't failing? What if they're listening? And we'll explore the final step, how to speak to your aging body so that it can finally respond. But before we go there, I'll ask you gently, when was the last time you let yourself be seen? Not in your strength, not in your knowledge, but in your softness? Because oxytocin doesn't reward pride, it rewards presence. A conversation with your body. The hormones were listening all along. It always ends here, not with numbers on a chart, not with a bottle of supplements, not with a single diagnosis, but with a pause. A moment of stillness where someone, maybe for the first time in decades, says to themselves, maybe I'm not broken, maybe I'm just unheard. That's what Eleanor finally said to me 3 months after she first walked into my office, feeling hollow, foggy, betrayed. "I thought my body gave up on me," she said, "but now I think I just stopped speaking its language." And that, my dear friend, is the heartbeat of this entire journey. Your hormones, those quiet, invisible currents beneath your skin, have not abandoned you. They have been trying to reach you, through wakefulness, through fatigue, through craving and calm and confusion. They don't shout, they don't punish. They signal. And the moment you listen, they begin to shift. Not perfectly, not instantly, but unmistakably. We began this journey with the idea that your hormones age faster than you do. But what if that's not quite true? What if they don't age ahead of you, but in protest of how the world has asked you to live? With too much stress, too little sleep, shallow breath, processed light and plastic food, no touch, no trust, no real rest. In that environment, your hormones do what they must: survive. They shut down libido to conserve energy. They elevate cortisol to keep you on edge. They store fat, slow digestion, numb pleasure, not to punish, but to protect. And when we finally answer them, not with force, but with curiosity, they begin to forgive. This isn't about youth. This is about partnership, because your body has never once asked you to be young. It has asked you to be nourished, to be noticed, to be safe, to be touched, to be aligned. And when you give it these things, even imperfectly, even late in the game, miracles begin to feel ordinary. Suddenly, your eyes brighten at 10 a.m. Your mood lifts before the coffee. Your hands reach, not just for chores, but for people. And in those moments, you are not younger. You are whole. Margaret no longer fears the 3 p.m. crash. Harold naps now in full sunlight. Judith plays piano again, with lipstick on. Robert dreams. Miriam says yes to hugs. And Eleanor? She's in love. Not with someone new, not yet, but with her own company. She goes walking every morning now, the same path, same hour, same trees. But she told me recently, they feel different now, brighter, and I think it's because I'm bringing my whole self. I'm not just surviving the walk, I'm in it. So now I'll ask you, what if your aging isn't a decline, but a conversation you haven't had the time or the tools to answer? What if your fatigue is a plea, your fog a question, your silence a space waiting for your voice? Because here's the truth. You were never meant to fade. You were meant to shift. And if you walk gently, if you breathe fully, if you touch the world with presence and let it touch you back, your hormones will hear it, and they will respond. If this story spoke to you, if you felt even a single yes rise quietly in your chest, I'd be honored if you'd support this channel. Leave a comment, share your story, let someone else know they're not invisible. And subscribe so we can keep walking this path together, because the journey doesn't end here. It only begins again, with attention, with warmth, and with you. Until next time, Doctor.